1 minute to comply, Cole. After that, we're breaching, with or without your permission. The commanding bark echoed through my front door, carrying that unmistakable ring of authority unique to law enforcement. Former military for sure, the kind of voice that had learned to demand instant obedience in combat zones. Dawn was barely staining the Texas sky with its first pale brushstrokes, and my world had already started to unravel. Standing in my own entryway at 5:30, I fought to clear the cobwebs of interrupted sleep from my mind. My combat-trained reflexes had jolted me awake at the first knock, a skill honed through 3 tours that had saved my life more times than I could count. Old Gunny Martinez's words rang in my ears. A Marine's mind is his deadliest weapon. It better fire up faster than any enemy's trigger finger. Captain Cole, Sergeant Reynolds, Metro Police Department. This is your final warning. The tactical assessment came automatically. Muscle memory from years of combat operations. 3 patrol units visible through the living room window, positioned for maximum coverage. Standard containment protocol. The neighbors were already gathering their morning entertainment, faces peering through curtains like spectators at a public execution. But what set off alarm bells in my head wasn't the police presence. It was the absence. Where the hell was Rachel? Weapons down, Marine coming out. I projected my voice with parade ground clarity, reaching for the deadbolt. Let's keep this professional, gentlemen. The door hadn't completed its arc before 2 tactical officers flowed in with textbook precision. Their movements spoke of extensive SWAT experience, smooth, coordinated, leaving no angles uncovered. A third maintained overwatch from the porch, his stance speaking of serious training. Down on the deck. Hands interlocked behind your head. Easy now. I kept my voice steady as I dropped to my knees, muscle memory from countless drills taking over. Captain Marcus Cole, 1st Marine Division. Let's handle this like professionals. Stow it, Captain. Reynolds' voice hardened as the cuffs snapped shut with practiced efficiency. His Miranda recitation began, but my attention had locked onto something far more disturbing. There across my once peaceful cul-de-sac stood Rachel. My wife of 8 years pressed her hand against her mouth, shoulders trembling. But it was the man beside her that made my combat-hardened heart skip a beat. Mike Anderson, my battle brother since the crucible of Paris Island. His face carried an expression I'd only seen once before, in Fallujah, when he'd accidentally triggered the IED that cost us Thompson and Rodriguez. The rights advisory faded to white noise as yesterday evening's scene replayed with brutal clarity. The tension crackling through our usually comfortable dinner routine. Rachel's uncharacteristic silence. The way she'd recoiled when I'd mentioned her recent flurry of suspicious phone activity. Domestic assault charges filed at 500 hours. Reynolds' clipped tones yanked me back to reality. Your wife provided photographic evidence of injuries. What injuries? The words burst out before I could contain them, sharp enough to make the junior officer's hand twitch toward his sidearm. I'd never laid a hand on her in anger, not once. Tell it to the magistrate, Reynolds responded, hauling me to my feet with professional detachment. We're Oscar Mike. The perp walk to the waiting cruiser felt like a surreal nightmare. Every neighbor's window framed watching faces. Susan Bennett next door was already typing furiously on her phone, no doubt feeding the social media machine. Tomorrow's narrative was already writing itself. Decorated Marine snaps. They'd all do eventually. Ptsd turns war hero into monster. We always said those combat vets were walking time bombs. Daddy? A small voice cut through my tactical thinking like a knife through Kevlar. I looked up to see my 7-year-old Emily pressed against her bedroom window, her blue eyes wide with confusion and growing fear. It's just a misunderstanding, princess. I forced warmth into my voice, drawing on the same strength that had gotten me through 18 hours of enemy fire in Kandahar. Daddy's going to sort everything out. I'll be home before you know it. That's enough. Reynolds guided me firmly toward the patrol car. Time to move. In that last moment before the car doors sealed my fate, I caught a glimpse that set off every warning sensor in my combat-trained brain. Mike was whispering urgently to Rachel, his hand on her shoulder, while she wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of what I suddenly realized was his sweatshirt. What kind of game was unfolding here? And why did my most trusted brother-in-arms look like he was carrying a burden heavier than any combat load we'd shouldered together? The slam of the car door echoed with a finality that marked the end of my normal life. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 combat deployments, 2 silver stars, a Purple Heart earned in the bloodiest house-to-house fighting since Fallujah. And here I sat, cuffed in the back of a patrol car like some common street thug. I caught Reynolds studying me in the rearview mirror, his eyes carrying that mix of professional detachment and personal curiosity I'd seen in veteran cops before. "Level with me, Sergeant," I kept my voice low, trained sniper's calm masking the storm beneath. "What exactly is the situation here?" He studied me for a long moment before responding. "Your wife's statement alleges death threats, Captain. Claims you've been displaying increasingly unstable behavior since returning from Afghanistan. According to her testimony, you became violent last night when she refused to unlock her phone." The cold fury that filled me wasn't the blind rage they'd expect from a PTSD rattled vet. Instead, it was the calculating anger I'd learned behind a sniper's scope, the kind that sharpens focus rather than clouds it. Rachel had played this perfectly. The unstable combat veteran narrative was tailor-made for headlines and sympathy. "She's also expressed concerns for her personal safety," Reynolds added carefully. "Given your combat training and—" "My combat training?" A humorless smile crossed my face. "You served too, Sergeant. In your experience, how many Marines bring the war home to their families?" His silence held a note of uncertainty. Maybe he was remembering his own brothers in arms, or perhaps questioning the timing. If I was truly violent, why hadn't Rachel called 911 during the alleged incident? Why wait until pre-dawn to file a report? The patrol car pulled into the station's Sally Port, but my sniper-trained eyes had already caught something that made my gut clench. Mike's distinctive black Dodge Ram, customized with Force Recon decals, sat in the far corner of the lot. The heavy morning dew coating its hood told me it had been there for hours, long before Rachel had supposedly filed her complaint. The holding cell greeted me with its antiseptic sterility, all concrete and steel, straight out of every cop show I'd ever ignored. The institutional fluorescent lights cast hard shadows, turning everything into a study of stark contrasts. "Cool your heels here," Reynolds said, removing the cuffs with professional efficiency. "Detectives en route." I massaged my wrists, feeling that particular kind of calm settle over me, the same stillness that had let me maintain overwatch positions for days at a time. "Stay frosty, Captain," I muttered to myself, falling back on old training. Assess, analyze, adapt. Memory flashed unbidden to 3 years ago. Kandahar Province, Taliban ambush, our unit pinned down in a bombed-out compound. It had seemed hopeless until Mike found their blind spot, covered our withdrawal with precision fire that would have made Carlos Hathcock proud. He'd saved the entire squad that day, but now I couldn't help wondering if he was really still that same brother-in-arms. "Captain Cole." The voice from the door belonged to a man who screamed detective, from his off-the-rack suit to his world-weary stance. Mid-50s, gray overtaking his dark hair, eyes that had seen too much. "Detective Morrison. Feel like having a conversation." "About these fabricated assault charges?" I matched his casual tone. "By all means." He settled onto the bench opposite me, pulling out a weathered notebook. "Tell me about last night, Captain, and remember, in my experience, lies have a way of coming back like badly thrown grenades." "Fair enough." I leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Here's your truth, Detective. I returned from base at 18:30 hours, had dinner with my wife. Noticed she was acting jumpy, constantly checking her phone. When I asked what was wrong, she got even more agitated." "And that's when you demanded to see her phone?" Morrison's pen scratched across his notepad. "Requested, not demanded. 8 years of marriage teaches you when something's off. There were signs." "Signs that made you hit her?" "Negative." I kept my voice level. "She claimed fatigue, retreated upstairs, locked herself in our bedroom. Next thing I know, your people are at my door." Morrison studied me like I was a particularly complex piece of evidence. "You know, Captain, most suspects in these cases react differently. They rage against the system, demand lawyers, but you're sitting here like you're delivering an after-action report." I allowed a thin smile. "That's because this is an operation, Detective. I just haven't figured out the objective yet, but someone knows. Someone who arrived here before my wife even filed her complaint." "Care to elaborate?" "Mike Anderson, my best friend since boot camp. His truck's been in your lot since before sunrise." Something flickered in Morrison's expression. He closed his notebook and stood. "Sit tight, Captain. I believe we both have some verification to do." Left alone, I closed my eyes, letting my mind work through the puzzle pieces. How Rachel had carefully documented every stress reaction I'd shown in recent months. How she'd managed to be present for every flashback episode. The increasing frequency of her conversations about my military benefits and life insurance. Then memory served up another scene that hit like a sniper's round. 3 weeks ago, coming home early from base, Mike's black Ram in the driveway. Rachel rushing out to intercept me on the porch, too quickly, too nervously, and Mike following behind with that forced smile. They'd rather. Just dropping off some insurance paperwork. At the time, I dismissed it. Mike was family, Emily's godfather, our most frequent dinner guest, the man who'd pulled me out of a burning Humvee outside Kandahar. But now every piece was falling into place, forming a picture uglier than anything I'd seen in combat. And believe me, I'd seen things that would make civilian horror movies look like Disney productions. "Welcome to war," I whispered to the empty cell, feeling that familiar sniper's calm settle over me. Just not the kind you prepared for. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. I stood squaring my shoulders like I used to before addressing the troops, when they needed to see that steel still existed in the world. The game was in play. Now I knew all the pieces on the board. "Detective," I called out as Morrison passed the cell. "Give my wife and my old friend a message. Tell them I remember our Marine Corps training well. The first rule of marksmanship: never rush the shot. There's no room for mistakes." He turned, studying me with renewed interest. "Is that a threat, Captain?" "Not at all," I replied, letting a predatory smile play across my face, the same one my men had nicknamed the Wolf's Grin. "Just sharing some tactical wisdom. Tell them I understand now. They should prepare for counter-battery fire." The first night in the detention block felt eerily similar to combat observation posts. The same hyper-awareness, the same attention to every sound and movement. Only instead of Afghan mountains and desert wind, I had concrete walls and the antiseptic burn of industrial cleaners. And rather than trusted brothers in arms watching my six, I had only the rhythmic snoring of other inmates and occasional guard checks for company. "Hey, soldier boy." A voice from the neighboring bunk cut through the darkness. "Can't sleep? Conscience keeping you up?" I maintained my silence. 15 hours in general population had taught me the best response was no response, especially when you're wearing the label of domestic abuser. "That's the thing with you military types," the unseen voice continued. "Big heroes overseas, then you come home and beat on women. Blame it on PTSD, right? Combat stress? You're just animals." The heavy metal door at the end of the block clanged open, silencing my unwelcome companion. The guard's footsteps were a welcome interruption. A few more seconds and my carefully maintained discipline might have slipped. And that's exactly what they wanted. One aggressive move, one flash of anger, and Rachel's accusations would gain concrete foundation. Rachel. Memory ambushed me with an image from 3 years ago. Our last vacation before deployment, Gulf Coast beaches, her laughter sparkling like sunlight on waves. "I'll always be here waiting, babe, no matter what happens." How had those words turned to ashes in my mouth? The second morning started with a surprise. During breakfast, a tasteless oatmeal that made MREs seem gourmet, a familiar guard appeared at the cell door. "Cole, you've got a visitor." In the visitation room, Mike sat hunched over the metal table. His face carried the same haunted look I'd seen in Fallujah the day he lost half his fire team. "Marcus." His voice was rough as sandpaper. "This whole thing's a nightmare. I haven't slept since it went down." "What's happening, Mike?" I studied my old friend's face with the same intensity I'd once used to read distant terrain. "You were there. You saw it all unfold." He ran a hand across his face, a gesture I remembered from countless tough moments in our service together. "Something's very wrong here, brother. Rachel, she's changed lately. New clothes, expensive jewelry. I didn't think much of it at first, but now..." "Now what?" "Yesterday I saw her in town, with some slick character in a $1,000 suit. They didn't notice me, so I followed them." Name's Richard Blackwood, local real estate developer. They met at Carmela's, you know, that upscale Italian place where all the city's power players do lunch. Mike's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Marcus, I saw them kissing, and from how they acted, it wasn't their first rendezvous." Ice formed in my gut. So that explained it. The mysterious phone calls, sudden errands, nervous behavior of recent months. It all clicked into place like rounds in a magazine. "I need your help, Mike," I spoke quietly but firmly. "Just like the old days, remember our code. Marines never leave their own behind." He straightened up, and I saw a familiar glint in his eyes, the one that had made him one of our unit's deadliest operators. "What's the play, Captain?" "Surveillance, intelligence gathering, everything we learn in Force Recon. I need proof that her statement is false, and I need to know everything about this Blackwood character." Roger that, sir. Mike's mouth curved in a predator's smile. The same expression he'd worn behind his scope on countless missions. Run it like a combat op. Affirmative, but by the book, strictly legal. We can't give them any ammunition to use against us. The next days morphed into a strange waiting game. I played the role of the subdued prisoner while Mike ran what amounted to a full-scale reconnaissance operation in the civilian world. On day 3, he brought the first intelligence drop. "This Blackwood's dirty as a pig farm after a flash flood," Mike reported, falling into our old mission briefing patterns. "He's got a string of questionable real estate deals, multiple complaints from burned investors, and here's something interesting. Give it to me straight. Remember that Italian restaurant? I set up observation. They meet there daily during lunch. And they're not just talking about romance." Mike pulled out his phone and played a recording. "Listen." Rachel's voice emerged from the speaker. "Once the charges stick, the house is ours. Military pension, survivor benefits, everything transfers to me. Richard, baby, we can finally start the life we've dreamed about." My fists clenched until the knuckles went white. "What else you got?" "Oh, it gets better." Mike's grin turned feral. "Yesterday, I tracked Blackwood to his office. Want to know what I found? Those bruises Rachel's showing off, they're fake. Professional theatrical makeup, applied right there in his office. I've got photos and video of the whole process. Son of a, I exhaled slowly, so it's all fabricated. From start to finish. But here's the kicker. I cracked their message spreads. They've been planning this for months. Every stress reaction, every flashback. She deliberately provoked you, recorded everything. Building the perfect image of an unstable combat vet. I leaned back, feeling that cold sniper's focus crystallize. Outstanding work, Sergeant. Now we need an engagement plan. Already drafted, Mike leaned forward, his voice dropping to a tactical whisper. Remember what we learned in advanced recon. The best way to neutralize a target is to make them expose themselves. He laid out the plan, and it was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. A strategy that would utilize every surveillance and pressure tactic we'd learned in Spec Ops. A campaign designed to teach a harsh lesson to those who thought they could play games with a Marine's honor. First phase, total surveillance. Mike spread out a rough diagram on the visitation room table like he was sketching a combat zone. I've got cameras set up around his office, the restaurant, and his house. Military-grade equipment, called in some favors from our old intel buddies. Drones will track their movements. What about communications? Working on it. Remember Johnson from our unit? He's in cybersecurity now. Will help us access security footage from their meeting spots. All legal, through official channels. He's got the clearance. I nodded, feeling that familiar pre-mission focus settle in. Next phase. Psychological pressure. Remember how we handled enemy observers? Made them think we were everywhere and nowhere. The Ghost Protocol, I smiled, remembering our old tactics. Exactly. I'll start appearing at their meeting spots. Full dress blues, ribbons and all. Just sitting there, watching. Each day getting closer. They'll start making mistakes, getting sloppy. And meanwhile? Meanwhile, I'm digging into Blackwood's operations. His real estate empire. It's house of cards. Already found 3 investors willing to testify about fraudulent deals. But here's the real gold mine. His finances. Something's way off. Rather. Too much cash flow. Too perfect bookkeeping. I saw that familiar fire in my friend's eyes. The same intensity he'd shown before complex missions. Mike was in his element, tracking, gathering intel, preparing for the kill shot. Remember, I lowered my voice. No violence, no threats. Everything has to be clean. Copy that, Captain. We're not them. We operate by the code. Besides, he smirked, there are things worse than physical pain. Like the constant fear of exposure. The grinding anxiety of knowing you're being watched, that the hammer could drop any moment. I sat back, feeling that pre-mission confidence building. It was coming together, that perfect moment when every element aligns for a successful operation. How long do you need? 7 days max. They're already cracking. Yesterday, I watched Blackwood sweep his Lexus for bugs. And Rachel? She's jumping at shadows, constantly looking over her shoulder. Good. Execute according to plan. And Mike? Sir. Thanks. For keeping the faith. For staying true to what makes a Marine. He stood squaring his shoulders, that same parade brown posture I'd seen in 1,000 pre-mission briefings. Semper Fi, Captain. The motto's not just words. When Mike left the visitation room, I felt my lips curve into that predator's smile. The same one that had crossed my face before taking perfect shots from impossible distances. The game was on, and now I knew we'd win. Because we had more than just truth on our side. We had 15 years of combat experience. More importantly, we had that unbreakable Marine Corps brotherhood that no amount of money could buy. The following days became a strange waiting game. Prison routine, reveille, count, show, yard time, blended with Mike's infrequent but information-packed visits. Each time, he brought new details of their little war. "You were right about Blackwood," he reported 3 days later. "Tracked into a country club outside town. Know what I caught on video? Meeting with some guy who screamed organized crime. Thick envelope changing hands, real cloak and dagger stuff. Money laundering? Looks that way." Johnson dug into his accounts. "The numbers coming through are way beyond what legitimate real estate could generate. But here's the clincher. He just put tickets. Guess where?" "Where?" "Cayman Islands, 2 first-class seats, departing in 4 weeks, and Rachel's passport just got an expedited visa stamp." My stomach clenched. "So they're planning to bolt. Once they get access to my accounts and benefits." "Exactly. But there's more." Mike's voice dropped lower. "Remember his latest development project? That luxury oceanfront complex. The one he marketed as the investment opportunity of the decade." "Yeah, I found the real documents. The building's a death trap. Failed every safety code inspection. He bribed officials, forged permits. People invested millions in what amounts to a vertical coffin." I whistle blow. "That's federal territory." Straight up Ryko case. And here's the kicker, Rachel knew. I recorded their lunch conversation. She was laughing while he bragged about conning the investors. "How's Operation Ghost proceeding?" Mike's grin held the satisfaction of a successful mission. "Running like a precision-tuned M40A5. Yesterday, I posted up at Carmela's, 2 tables over from them. Full dress blues, campaign medals on display. They pretended not to notice, but Rachel spilled her wine twice, and Blackwood's hands were shaking so bad he dropped his phone. Keep pushing." This morning I was outside his office building, just standing there, reading the Wall Street Journal. He tried sneaking out through the service entrance, can you believe it? And when I started doing evening patrols past his gated community, Mike chuckled. "Brother, he hired private security and installed additional surveillance cameras." I smiled, remembering our old instructor's words. "Fear is the deadliest round in your magazine. We learned that in Fallujah, remember? A bullet kills once, but fear kills every second of every day." "That's not all." Mike pulled out his phone. "Check out what I captured yesterday." The screen showed Rachel and Blackwood in a heated argument in his office parking lot. No audio, but the body language told the story. She was furious about something, he was defensive. When she tried to slap him, he caught her wrist, with enough force to leave real bruises this time. "They're unraveling," Mike commented, "turning on each other. Give it another few days, and this whole scheme will implode on its own. We still need ironclad evidence. Something that'll force a confession. Already on it. Remember Mrs. Henderson from next door? The one who watches the neighborhood like a hawk. The retired teacher with the security obsession. Her cameras have a perfect view of your front porch, and she keeps archives going back months." A guard appeared at the door. "Time's up." "1 more minute." Mike turned back to me. "Hold fast, brother. This ends soon. And remember, we're not seeking revenge. We're restoring honor." I nodded. "Execute as planned, Sergeant. But watch your 6. A cornered rat fight sturdy. Nothing we haven't handled before, sir." Back in my cell, I felt real hope for the first time since this started. The plan was working. The enemy was making mistakes. And most importantly, I had a true brother in arms whose combat skills were proving just as lethal in this civilian warfare as they had been overseas. On day 10 of my confinement, Mike showed up earlier than usual. His eyes held that particular gleam I remembered from our most successful operations. "They'd cracked, Captain," he reported, barely containing his satisfaction. "Blackwood broke first. Last night he tried to empty his accounts. Panicked so badly he didn't even notice the bank's security team tailing him." "And Rachel?" "That's where it gets interesting. She caught wind of his solo escape attempt. Lost it completely in his office, got it all on tape. Screaming about betrayal, threatening to go to the police. And he snapped back. Started yelling that it was all her idea, the whole frame-up. That he just played along because," Mike hesitated. "Spit it out. Because she promised him a cut of your military pension and life insurance. They were so busy fighting, they didn't even notice the office security cameras rolling." I leaned back, feeling strangely empty. "So that's it. Just a cold-blooded financial play." "Not entirely." Mike pulled out his phone. Listen to this last recording. You need to hear it. Rachel's voice emerged, crackling with hysteria. Yes, I used him. I'm sick of being a hero's wife. Always on duty, always deployed. What about me? Sitting at home, waiting for that dreaded knock on the door, the folded flag. Turn it off. I winced. What's next? Better than we hoped. Remember that neighbor with the cameras? She caught Rachel applying the stage makeup before going to the police. And we got a witness, the theatrical supply store clerk who sold her the professional great effects kit. What about Blackwood's corruption records? In the DA's hands, along with recordings of their conversations about the real estate fraud. He's under active investigation. Spotted a surveillance team outside his house yesterday. I exhaled slowly. Inside, I felt that post-mission emptiness, like after a long-range elimination. You know, Mike, remember that operation in Ramadi? When we caught the insurgent leader not through force, but by slowly dismantling his network. Operation Phantom, our textbook play. Same principle work here. We didn't go for revenge. We just made them feel what I felt. The fear, the uncertainty, the paranoia. Mike nodded, and they broke, like anyone who trades their principles for quick cash. What now? Now, he smiled. Tomorrow I hand everything to your JAG lawyer, and the day after. He paused meaningfully. Blackwood has his first interview with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Word is he's already hinting at a plea deal. Ready to spill everything, including the false assault scheme. I stood, feeling something close to satisfaction rising in my chest. So justice does exist. It exists, brother. Sometimes it just needs a little help, especially if you're a Marine who knows how to run battlefield reconnaissance. When Mike left, I stood at my cell window for a long time. Somewhere out there, our operation was entering its final phase, and though I was behind bars, I felt like a victor. Because some things can't be bought or stolen. Honor, loyalty, brotherhood, and revenge served cold, just like our old special operations instructors taught us. Captain Cole, you're free to go. Those words rang through the courtroom like a sniper's shot. The judge was still talking about apologies on behalf of the justice system, but I wasn't listening. I was watching Rachel, sitting at the defendant's table next to Blackwood. Her face, so arrogant and confident yesterday, now looked ashen and defeated. It had happened fast. Blackwood, cornered by evidence of real estate fraud, broke first. Spilled everything, from the false accusation plot to details of their planned escape. Rachel held out until the prosecutor showed the surveillance footage and the makeup artist's testimony. Then something in her snapped. All rise. Court is adjourned. They found her in a Marriott bathroom. Wrists slashed with a broken mirror. A one-line suicide note. I betrayed more than my husband. I betrayed myself. They got to her in time. A week later, she was testifying against Blackwood from a wheelchair. Bandaged arms, telling their own story. 8 years. That's what Blackwood got for fraud and conspiracy and false accusation. Rachel, 5 years probation with mandatory psychiatric treatment. But most importantly, complete termination of parental rights. Daddy. That cry snapped me back to the present. I stood on my own front porch, watching my little girl flying down the stairs, tears streaming down her face. I knew it. I knew to come back. She crashed into me at full speed, and I caught her, feeling my own eyes getting suspiciously wet. Uncle Mike said truth always wins if you believe hard enough. That's right, Princess, I hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Especially when real Marines are fighting for it. What about Mom? Her voice trembled. Is she really bad? Uncle Mike said she's very sick and needs doctors to help her. I closed my eyes briefly, choosing my words. Sometimes grown-ups make terrible mistakes, sweetheart, really terrible ones. But that doesn't mean they were always bad. Sometimes people just lose their way. Like those soldiers you told me about, the ones who forgot about honor. Exactly like that, Princess. Dad? She looked up at me with those big gray eyes, Rachel's eyes, but filled with so much more trust. Will you teach me to be honest and brave like you and Uncle Mike? Absolutely, I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. But you know what? You're already brave. You never doubted your dad for a second. That's what matters most. We sat on the porch until sunset. I told her stories about real friendship and honor, about staying human even in the darkest times. She listened, head on my shoulder, the setting sun reflecting in her eyes. Somewhere in town, Rachel was preparing for her first trauma therapy session. Blackwood was getting acquainted with his cellmates at the Federal Correctional Facility. And Mike sat in his home office, looking at our old Force Recon unit photo. knowing he'd once again lived up to the Corps' highest principle: never leave a Marine behind. And me, I was finally home, really home. Though challenges lay ahead, I knew we'd handle them. Because some things are stronger than betrayal. Things that can't be bought, broken, or stolen. Honor, loyalty, and a father's love for his child. A year has passed. In my study among military decorations, there's a new photograph. It shows my daughter and me at her first Krav Maga tournament. She insisted on learning to be strong, like a real Marine. Mike's become a fixture in our household. Every Sunday we fire up the grill, and he teaches my princess the finer points of self-defense. Not for fighting, he tells her. For standing up for what's right. Rachel writes from the rehabilitation center. I don't respond, but I let our daughter maintain contact. Some wounds need time to heal on their own terms. Blackwood found religion in federal prison, they say. Well, everyone finds redemption their own way. And me? Every evening I check on my sleeping daughter, watching her peaceful face and thanking whatever higher power exists. For giving me a true brother in arms, for keeping me strong, for proving that justice, though slow, still exists. Each morning, walking her to the school bus, I see in her eyes that special light, absolute faith in goodness and justice, the kind of faith that neither betrayal, nor lies, nor attempts to destroy our family could extinguish. Because some things transcend evil. Eternal values, passed from father to daughter. From heart to heart, from one Marine to the next generation of truth's defenders. Yesterday, she asked me something that stopped me in my tracks. Daddy, when I grow up, can girls be Marines too? I looked at her determined little face, so serious and focused, and remembered all those times in combat when it wasn't strength or skill that got us through. It was heart. Pure, unbreakable spirit. Princess, I said, kneeling to meet her eyes, Marines aren't made by gender. They're made by what's in here. I tapped her chest, right above her heart. By honor, courage, and commitment. And you've already got those in spades. Her smile could have lit up Camp Lejeune. Today, watching her practice her martial arts katas in the backyard, moving with that focused determination that reminds me so much of Mike in our training days, I realized something profound. This right here, is what we were really fighting for in all those far-off places. Not just abstract concepts of freedom and democracy, but the right of little girls to grow up believing in justice, the chance for families to heal and rebuild, the opportunity to pass on values that matter. Mike comes over more often now, not just for the Sunday barbecues. Sometimes we sit on the deck after Emily's gone to bed, watching the stars and talking about the old days. But more often, we talk about the future, about how to raise a strong, principled kid in a world that sometimes seems to have forgotten what principles mean. You know what, brother? He said last night, looking at Emily's latest martial arts trophy. Maybe this whole mess was a blessing in disguise. Shows her that even when the world gets ugly, honor still wins, if you fight for it hard enough. I thought about that for a long time after he left. About how sometimes the worst betrayals can lead to the strongest bonds. How losing what you thought was love can teach you what real love means. The Corps taught us many things. How to fight, how to survive, how to win. But maybe the most important lesson was one we're only now truly understanding. That the real victories aren't won on battlefields with bullets and bombs, but in everyday moments with patience and principle. As I write this in my study, I can hear Emily in the backyard, counting cadence just like she's heard Mike and me do. Her voice is strong, confident, full of that unshakable faith that only children and Marines seem to possess. And I realize we didn't just survive a betrayal. We didn't just win a battle. We're building something new, something stronger. A legacy of honor that will live long after our combat stories are forgotten. Semper Fi isn't just a motto. It's a promise. To our country, to our corps, to our children. And some promises can never be broken.